And to present his opening remarks, may I now request Mr. Hemant Kanoria, CMD SREI, to please join us on the dais and on the podium. Sir.
Honorable Shri Venkaiah Naidu ji, Honorable Shri Raman Singh ji, distinguished guests, members, panelists on the dais. It's a great opportunity to be here among you, and I especially thank Economic Times to invite me again this year. Actually, if you look at it, that day for yesterday there was a momentous decision of the Supreme Court, and infrastructure which was started about 20 years back in 1992-93, the infrastructure sector which was opened up for private investments, and it got a major boost during the BJP government, sir, between 1999 to 2004, when NHI introduced PPP model for the highway building up, and model concession agreement was also laid down. And fortunately, we have seen that model concession agreement was laid down in a watertight manner. So we have had problems in the road sector, but there have been no scams, at least. So therefore, we have not gone back in history and had to redo everything. Power sector also, the Electricity Act new act was promulgated in 2004. It came into effect in June 2009, but it was during your government that the new act was also promulgated. Unfortunately, it has still not been implemented in its word and spirit. Otherwise, the power sector would have been on a different track altogether. We see that the power sector has been saddled with a lot of problems, and especially after the announcement which has come day for yesterday, the entire market, bankers, power generation companies, distribution companies, coal companies, mining companies, contractors who are involved in that, everyone is in a state of flux, and they are all waiting for a very clear-cut direction from the government. And I'm sure that with the clarity that your government has, we would be in a position to know very soon that what would be the roadmap forward in this particular sector. Because power affects each and every one of us, and the problem needs to be solved as soon as possible in this particular sector. As we have the opportunity of both Honorable Mr. Venkaiah Naidu and Dr. Raman Singh being here, and the Prime Minister has announced 100 smart cities, I would like to just dwell upon that and bring certain facts to your notice, and which we think would help in building up these smart cities much faster. Some people are still confused about the smart cities, that what does this smart city mean? Does it mean that only smart people will be allowed to stay in those particular cities? Would it be smart cities where it will be technologically updated, where you have telecom connections, security systems, which are all electronically controlled? Would it be smart cities which has water availability, sewerage systems, landscaping, electricity, everything which is available, which anyone would want to hope for a utopian city to be having? So what does it exactly mean? And I think that I'm sure that in the next few months, we'll have clarity on that from your government, that what would encompass a smart city. However, when we are going to build up the smart cities also, a question which crops up is that whether private sector would be involved in building up these smart cities, or it will be left to the government to do it. And if private participation would be there, what level of participation can the private sector have? Is it right from acquiring the land to building up the infrastructure, or it would just be doing the work of a contractor or a construction company just building up, and the government is going to manage and own the smart cities? So I think that those are areas which I am sure that your government is working on, and will soon see clarity on that. There are some of the states, because land matters are state subjects also. to a very large extent, in spite of the fact that we have a complex land acquisition act now, so which is very, very complex, and it is very difficult to acquire land anywhere or purchase land anywhere. Besides that, many of the states still has the Urban Land Ceiling Act. I come from a state, West Bengal, which still has an Urban Land Ceiling Act, and no one in the city can buy land above 5,000 square feet still. So that is what whether a developer or an individual can buy. Just 5,000 square feet of land, otherwise it attracts the urban land ceiling and the government, and the land gets vested in the government. And if it is out of the municipal limits, then it is only 24 acres of land. So building up smart cities in West Bengal would be quite difficult unless the center is in a position to work along with the state to simplify those particular laws so people can build up large cities. Also the size of these cities, whether it would be 100 acres, 250 acres, 1,000 acres, 5,000 acres, or whether it be multiples of 250 acres. So that is again something that we all would eagerly wait to hear from you, that what is the government's strategy on that particular front. I think that the private sector has done a good job in building up a large number of cities in and around metro towns in India, and also there are a lot of secondary towns which have been developed. And along with secondary towns, new cities have also come up, but these have been small parcels of 100 acres, 250 acres. It is not actually the size of a city. It is just these small towns, or I would say that some developments which have taken place along with the major cities. So I think that the clarity from the government that what should be the size, the minimum size of a smart city would also be important. What we read in the papers, that many of the present cities, they are taking up certain areas and saying that, let us convert these into smart areas. So I think that that is what our suggestion would be, that would basically bring down the entire concept of a smart city into a very localized area. So the government should avoid doing that and give a much larger picture on building up these smart cities and what it should encompass. The vision is very good, and India needs a large number of smart cities to come up, because with the urbanization of population, people moving from the rural areas to urban areas, and especially in urban areas also, a lot of slums are getting developed. So therefore, I think that it is the right time, and the government and your government has made this announcement at absolutely an appropriate time. But infrastructure development would be key in this. Also, another area that we would like to point out, which the government should keep in mind, is that when you are encouraging private sector to come into building up smart cities, three main constraints would be there. One would be on land acquisition, so how to go about purchasing the land. What kind of facilitation could the center or the state give to the people to purchase those land, the developers, infrastructure companies which are there. Second area which would be important would be on environment clearances, etc. And I think still that land and environment issues, if it is delegated to the states to finally decide, it will become much easier. A larger framework or a template can be laid down by the center, both on the land acquisition and on the environment, and let the states take the decision. The states, let them decide that what kind of an environment clearance that they require to give, which areas they want to develop, because if everything comes to the center, it takes a very long time. So therefore, those should be delegated. The third area which will be very critical would be financing, because townships or smart cities are considered by the RBI as real estate development. It is still not been included into the category of infrastructure development. So funding from the banks and institutions is very difficult for people who are wanting to develop smart cities, because RBI does not take into account whatever infrastructure is developed in those particular towns. It is just a real estate development, and real estate is always having a negative connotation from the banker's perspective. So funding will become an issue. So therefore, that is a third area which needs to be addressed for the building of smart cities. I think it's a very good idea to have these particular cities, and we should, the faster the government is in a position to come out with clarity on these particular areas, it will be better, and you can encourage and you can have a large number of people coming in. At the same time, there's another request that we would have is that there are a large number of people who already have purchased land parcels. And if they can be facilitated by the government, that how the government can work along with them, because today to acquire land itself under the present act would take almost about 5 to 7 years before people are able to buy land. And also to buy land in contiguous fashion may take anywhere between 5 to 10 years with the complications which are there. And why we are in a position to say that very authoritatively is that last 25 years we have been financing infrastructure, and as a financial institution we see there are a lot of problems which people were facing earlier to get contiguous land, but now with this particular act it has become even more difficult even to set up now no one will set up a power plant, but even to set up a power plant, or because the road sector is much clearer because of national highway acquiring the land, they also have difficulties. But still, for the government to buy or acquire land is much easier than for the private sector to do it, because they are faced with a lot of complications and problems. So these are some of our suggestions for the infrastructure. I think that infrastructure is absolutely at a crossroad today in India. We have, till about 2008, there was a lot of excitement in the infrastructure sector. Many of the areas where the private sector went wrong in aggressive bidding, etc. So therefore, I think that we share the same blame. But at the same time, there are many of the areas where the government has not been in a position to give clarity on the policies and regulations. And this is the time that if we want investments in infrastructure to come up, the Planning Commission, which is now scrapped, had plans of that in the 5 years they had investment envisaged of about $1 trillion. But I think that India can attract investments of more than trillions of dollars in infrastructure if we have clarity and the roadmap is there that how people can come and invest. At this particular juncture, the investors overseas are very scared to come into India and to invest, especially in the infrastructure sector. Your government, with the Honorable Prime Minister spearheading the cause and getting international investors and again getting the confidence back of the international investors in India is a very good step. But at the same time, I think that on ground in the country, we are at a crossroad, and sooner the latter, if we put down the clarity and the rules and regulations are made simpler, I think that we are at the takeoff stage. And as an infrastructure practitioner or being in this field for 25 years, this year we are celebrating 25 years of being in the infrastructure sector, being one of the pioneers in starting it, supporting construction companies, contractors, infrastructure companies. We see that the pain is there everywhere. And today the bankers, because of the huge non-performing loans which they have in this particular sector, they become very wary of financing it. So this is another area of financing which needs to be addressed by the government. Otherwise, in spite of getting all the rules and regulations on track, we may not attract the investments in the infrastructure sector. So I think that the take home would be to get the financing in place, to get the rules and regulations simplified, and we are back on track. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.